Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Comic Sand Podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Jumps, and today I'm going to switch it up and talk about the history of the Marvel movies, the companies that made them, and why not all of them are connected. The reason for that being that back in the late 90s, early 2000s, Marvel actually sold the rights, the movie rights, that is, of a lot of their most popular characters to different movie production companies, such as Fox and Sony, but I'll get into that in a moment. The reason for that is actually in the 90s, the late 90s. I mean, I was really young, but I don't know exactly what was going on then, but I do know that they were going through somewhat of a recession in the comic book industry. Not as much demand at that time. And I'm sure there's, some underlying reasons for that. I know what some of you guys are thinking. What? Comic book companies weren't making money, but comics are so cool. I'm sure you guys are thinking that. But yeah, your guess is as good as mine. So to start with the history of these Marvel movies, now a lot of people would think, if we're thinking about the first Marvel movies made, they'd probably either say X-Men or Spider-Man. Because those were, two of the bigger franchises, Marvel franchises, made in the movies. But actually, lesser acknowledged, I won't say lesser known, but a lesser acknowledged series was actually started in 1998. It was the Blade series. Blade, played by Wesley Snipes. He was a half vampire hunter. And those rights were actually sold to New Line Cinema back in 1998, like I said. Now, I have seen promos for, not trailers, but just, promos for a Blade series or movie that is actually going to be created by our modern Marvel Studios under the ownership of Disney, like most of the other movies in the MCU that we've all come to know and love. And so, but I'll get into that in a moment. So now back to X-Men, Spider-Man. The first of those was actually X-Men. Fox acquired the rights to X-Men back in 2000, and they went on to make not just the original trilogy, X-Men, X2, X-Men 3, Last Stand, and then those, X-Men First Class and the ones that came after that. In my opinion, they kind of went downhill a little bit after X-Men First Class. Coming after that, shortly after, it was in 2002 when Sony bought the rights to Spider-Man. And that's the Tobey Maguire trilogy. Had also James Franco. Willem Dafoe was in the first movie. Alfred Molina played Dr. Octopus in the second. Topher Grace played Venom. He was the first one to play Venom on screen. I think Tom Hardy is a better choice. Not that I don't like Topher Grace. I liked him better in that 70s show. So again, shortly after that, we see in 2003, Universal bought the rights to the Hulk, and that was that movie was all right. It was with Eric Bana. It didn't really get very great reviews with the audience, but it was the first Hulk movie, at least with CGI. I know there was the series back in the day, but yeah, if anything, it was cool to see the Hulk on the big screen in CGI, whatnot. After that, that's when Marvel decided, because this whole time their agreements were that they would get, a portion, a piece of the pie. But after seeing the great success of the X-Men trilogy as well as the Spider-Man trilogy, they decided they didn't want just a piece of the pie, they wanted the whole thing. Understandable. And that's when, in 2004, Marvel Studios began. Now, it wasn't until 4 years after that we see their first two movies The first of which being the Incredible Hulk. That's the one with Edward Norton that some people think is a sequel to that Eric Bana Hulk in the past. It seems like it could be, but it's not really. Now, Marvel Studios did make that Hulk movie, a solo Hulk movie, but Universal still did retain distribution rights. So they were still getting money. Anytime that a solo Hulk movie was going to be made, Universal was going to get some of that action. And so that's why we haven't really seen Hulk in his own standalone movies. That's why he's been in, Thor Ragnarok, the Avengers movies, and whatnot. Shortly after, in the same year, Iron Man, which people say, really started the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that was also released in 2008. So at this time, it's just Marvel Studios doing their own thing. Disney doesn't own them at this time. But shortly after, in 2009, Disney's ears start to, perk up. And they're seeing, oh, these movies have a lot of potential. Let's get in on that action. And so in 2009, Disney acquires Marvel Studios, and that is where the beginning of, this big Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU, that's where that stems from, is Disney's acquiring of Marvel Studios. But keep in mind, at the time, they were still not allowed to have Spider-Man in their movies. Let's see. Fox also, you know what? I skipped over this one, but Fox also did have the rights to Fantastic Four. So, the original two that had Jessica Alba, Chris Evans, who went on to play Captain America later, those were also made by Fox. As well as that reboot with Michael B. Jordan that wasn't really that good. But, it was a movie. Up until 2020, those characters were not available to Disney. So remember back, Marvel sold its most popular characters' rights. So when they came up with Iron Man, that was a gamble. They weren't sure if it was going to really work for them. And so even moving forward, Avengers, back when it was just comics, they weren't their most iconic team. For a lot of people, it was the X-Men. That was the most iconic team. So it's really been a shock that they were able to build all of this off of the characters that they did have available to them. Now, in 2015, because I know I said that Spider-Man wasn't allowed to be in the Marvel Cinematic Universe because he was owned by Sony, but in 2015, so that Spider-Man could join the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Disney and Sony struck a deal. In return for Spider-Man appearing in the Disney Marvel movies, they would have a big role in producing Sony's Spider-Man movies. So Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man Far From Home, and the upcoming Spider-Man No Way Home. That was a weird way to stress the syllables. But those three movies are Sony movies, and that's why you won't see them on the Disney Plus app, because those rights are fully with Sony. So some people like to say that, one of Spider-Man's powers is that he can jump between the cinematic universes. Also, Deadpool. A lot of you like Deadpool, even if you don't like most of the other movies. Deadpool is among the favorites of a lot of people, and that was also a Fox property. In 2020, this is where things started to get exciting, because remember, Fox owns X-Men, they own Fantastic Four, they own Deadpool, and I believe that's it at the time. They get acquired by Disney. So Disney now has the rights to all of those characters, which is very exciting because the Disney Marvel movies tend to pull more from the the comic book origins than the other studios have in the past. So, now we're getting ready to see the X-Men interacting with the Avengers. And for those of you who don't know, there was a comic series called Avengers versus X-Men. That could happen now in the movies. As far as Fantastic Four, whenever they talk about the rights to the characters that they own, they're also referring to the adjacent characters. So, like Silver Surfer, he was in the Fantastic Four movies, and they portrayed Galactus as a giant cloud. But Disney now has the rights to Fantastic Four, Silver Surfer, Galactus, and I'm sure they're gonna do a very good job of their portrayal. I'm hoping for them to introduce the Fantastic Four in a Disney Plus series and then lead up to a movie. We still don't have Spider-Man fully. He's, we're kind of able to use him at the grace of Sony right now. But, anything could change. I mean, 10 years ago, I don't know if anyone would have thought that Disney was going to buy Fox. It's kind of scary to think if Disney were to buy Sony as well, but if it makes the movies more interesting, I'll take it. So, that's pretty much the history of it. Oh, one thing is that in regards to the Solo Hulk movie rights, which I said I was going to get back to, it's been reported but not confirmed that Disney does have the rights to Hulk now. Like I said, not confirmed. If there were to be a solo Hulk movie, I hope it would cover, what happened between Infinity War and Endgame. Because if you will think back, during Infinity War, the Hulk wasn't working, I guess. He wouldn't Hulk out from Bruce Banner. And then by the time we see him again in Endgame after the 5-year jump, he's now completely in sync, both Bruce Banner and the Hulk, to make, Professor Hulk or whatever they're calling him. We do know that they're making a She-Hulk series, which should see we should see Bruce Banner as the Hulk in that as well, seeing as how her origin has to do with getting a blood transfusion from Bruce Banner, which is her cousin. But that's a story for another time. That's pretty exciting to me. We're gonna see the X-Men, Fantastic Four. Just the possibilities are becoming more and more numerous of how they can proceed with our Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's it. If you have any questions about the history, anything that I said that didn't make sense, drop it in the comments. Like always, comment. I'm gonna put the words there, or the word comment. Yeah, like, share, subscribe. Definitely subscribe. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day.